Alright, it's video 4. This is the last video today, the series of videos. It's late, so in a way I'll try to be brief, but in a way this is the most important video in this series. I got to warn you not to, as I'm talking here, to put on your student hat or put on your technical hat and set your PC hat or your aside for right now, because I'm going to talk to you as you were as a technical person, not as a PC. Therefore, there shouldn't be any surfax and restimulation. I shouldn't be making anybody wrong, right? That's not my intention. My intention is to give you the facts, and only the facts. There's been a lot of confusion about the bridge and about the clearing and what happened to the church and etc., etc. How could a great piece of technology, how could it go so wrong? How could there be so many outpoints among the leadership? I would attempt to explain that tonight, not by giving you my opinion of what might have happened, but giving you some facts, dates, read you some things, because I had to go through the same thing. The question came about today is, what do we do to keep Scientology working in the FreZone? I'm going to cover that, but I'm going to cover number 1. I'm going to cover number 1, and number 1 is of KSW 1970, having the correct technology. That's number 1, and that's all I'm going to cover tonight. And it'll probably take me a half hour. And also we're going to talk about the difference between what we do in FreZone worldwide, or here in Reno, and our centers or our affiliated groups, and what Church Scientology is doing with their tech. There is a difference. A lot of people get out of church and they think it's all the same. All auditors are doing the same thing. Well, the test of sanity is to differentiate. I'm going to try to get you to differentiate tonight, that we are not all doing the same thing. Not in the FreZone, and not not in the church. Also, we're going to compare us to, like I said, other FreZone auditors as well as the church. In 1990, I left the church. I had all my high crimes up to date because I was auditing for orgs and missions. I read the Golden Era Tech. I got checked out on it. And while on the internship at AO on Standard Dynetics, the NED came out, and so I had to get checked out on that. Eventually, I did the NED grad course, which I showed you the certificate on that earlier. And so I was well versed in these two types of technologies already. I could see the difference, and this was what was the bone of contention, as I would say, as I had with the church, because the church wanted me to totally drop everything I learned and go Golden Era on this new technology. Drop Standard Dynetics and go with NED, New Era Dynetics. In 1990, I chose not to, and there was a board investigation, and then which led to a committee of evidence, and nothing was found other than I didn't want to get retrained. I said, why should I get retrained? There's 2 guys coming out of your office who went Dynetic Clear at my center that you approved of them. This is at the San Francisco org. And but they later on I learned that they were getting a flag. Somebody from Flag was telling them that this was what was going to happen at the end of the commave. As most of us know, the commives are usually in the church are usually already figured out what's going to happen before they even come out with the results. I learned that when I was on staff. We would come out with the results. I was on a commave committee, and we would come out with the results, and the guardian's office or somebody from Flag would come down and say, no, we don't want that result. Tear it up, have another commave, or this is the result you're going to give. So I knew when I was going through my committee of evidence that I wasn't going to get a fair trial. So finally I stood up and I said, okay, you guys do what you have to do. Obviously you think that I'm somebody that I'm not. I used to think that when I first got into my commave, I thought, oh, here was the top person off of Special Affairs. Here was the top person of the field. Here was a top auditor. Here was the Class 8 CS was sitting at my committee of evidence. So I thought, well, these are my peer groups. They this is who should be sitting there. And then I looked around, and that thought lasted for about just a few seconds, because all of a sudden I knew that these guys were looking at me, and were really looking at me. They were looking at some sort of projected mock-up they had about me, and I wasn't who they thought I was. I'm here for 20 years. I served the church, mission holder, wise consultant, advanced AO, making them a lot of money, and yet they were suspect. Later on, when I did my investigation, I found that they thought I was a independent FreZoner. And then I started looking at this thing. I said, well, maybe I should find out what this FreZoner stuff is, and who's involved in this. In 1990, I investigated it and found a lot of my friends in Class 8s were out there in the field. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but at that point, I decided to leave the church and really go into investigation, which I'm going to share with you tonight. There was something I read here that someone handed to me, and it was from David Mayo. Now, I met David Mayo 3 times, once in the church, did an internship under him, and then another time twice outside the church. But I was reading this thing, and it was quite interesting. I won't read the whole thing. It's only a page and a half, and I'll try to put it on my website. And it talks about the origin of knots, and I won't say anything confidential in this talk. I'll probably get pretty close to it, but not confidential. But he talks about the origin of knots, how he came to be Senior CS International. And it all started back in 1978. Because after I left the church, I was going, well, what is the correct tech? KSW number 1. Because I was in doubt. What is the correct tech? I mean, the RTC's telling me this. I was trained in 1972 to 75 and did internships on LRH Tech. All of a sudden, things were getting to be a little different. And so, before I read this here, I want to say this, that when you're trying to figure out a confusion, or you're trying to figure out something, the best thing to do is start to grab stable datums. Stable datums, right? And the stable datum we probably all could agree to is follow what LRH says.